Oh, hello YouTube, KurtCom97 here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about home networking and the fundamental devices that you'll need to run a basic home network. And then we're going to also move on to the more advanced stuff of how you could boost performance on your home network to get better bandwidth and better speeds from your hardware. First of all, I'd like to start today by saying sorry for the low picture quality. As you know from the last video, the the camera wasn't working, so I've had to go. Oh, hello YouTube, KurtCom97 here today, and we're going to talk. Okay, that's not normal. Ignore that. Okay, so as you know, the webcam wasn't working. I not fixed it, but I've got another laptop working today, so we're going to use the laptop webcam while we wait for our brand new webcam to arrive. So, with a home network, it's fairly simple what you need. Basically, you just want a router. So you can pull the internet in to your household and then distribute it among your devices that you want to be able to access the internet and other networking devices such as file sharing, printing, etc. So I'm going to show you a router right now, which I have an example of. This is an old router now. It's a D-Link DIR 645. It came free with a NAS box I bought about 6 months back now. It's a pretty good router. It's a 300 megabits per second output speed, and it's wireless N, which was until quite recently the most up-to-date version of Wi-Fi. However, now it has been replaced with its predecessor AC, which is apparently boasting a gigabit Ethernet gigabit speed output. Well, as we say, it's a theoretical bandwidth, so we're not saying that it's actually giving that out. But who knows? It's possible. I haven't really looked at that technology yet. On the back of your router, you're going to have at least 4 Ethernet ports normally, which you can see here. Ethernet 1 down to 4, and they're marked LAN on the router normally. And then there's normally 1 Ethernet port by itself, and that is preserved for the WAN. So that's where, say, you've got internet coming through your phone line or whatever. That cable coming from your phone line would go into this port that is sat by itself on your router. This router is also, because it's a D-Link, it comes with my NAS box, it has a USB drive slot on the back, and that's so you can plug it directly into the NAS box. If you don't want to take up an Ethernet space, you can use that. Also, if you have a normal printer that you use USB with, and it's not network capable, you can take the standard USB lead, you can plug it into the back of your router, and you've networked your printer, it's available on the network, it's mapped, so you need to map it on your computers or your devices, and then you can use that spare port there to do that with. A lot of routers have that now, actually. It's quite a good feature, I think. We're going to move on a tiny bit now about a bit more expanding. Say you've got a larger household. A lot of people now are opting, they want to stay wireless. You know, why would you want to run a 10-meter Ethernet wire from the bottom of your house up to the top of your house? You know, it's limited in speed, because you know you're going to eventually, running a longer Ethernet wire, the electrical current's got to travel further, so it's going to be a tiny bit slower than you would want. So a lot of people are opting for these little devices here. This is a wireless access point, and it's normally bridged to your router, so you'll use if we take this out of the way a second, on the back here you just have one Ethernet port, which is here, and that would normally plug into your router or another device somewhere, like a switch or something closer to the devices that you want to make wireless. And you would bridge that with your router. You normally use a thing called wireless bridging. You'll take the MAC address, which is normally printed on the back of your switch here, with these labels on the side, and you would enter that into the router's config to allow you to do wireless bridging with this device. It's still available on the network. A lot of the time it comes with its own SSD, so you just find it on the SSD. So you find it using your Wi-Fi options. If you've got a laptop or something, when you connect to Wi-Fi, you find the name for the wireless device, enter the password if you set one up, and you're away. You've got wireless access throughout your house. It's normally quite strong, which is brilliant. This little device isn't used no more. I switched to Linksys, which is provided by Cisco, and I'm using 600 megabits per second access points. This particular one, the TP-Link 150 megabits access wireless N. So still good, still quite modern. It's used. You can use it in any modern house if you want. We're going to talk now a tiny bit about expansion. So you've got a router, you have several computers or devices in your household. You haven't got enough Ethernet ports on your router, and the devices you want to connect aren't wireless compatible, or you just want to have them wired up. This is where you'll get a little device like this, or you can get bigger ones. This is a switch, and it basically allows you to connect one cable in from the router, which would go in any port here, normally opted in port 1, but it doesn't really matter what port it goes in. But you would have one of these switches, and it acts a little bit like a router. So in the fact that you stick your other devices in there, Ethernet devices, you would let the internet come in or whatever. They can communicate quite happily, because built in these devices is essentially a router board, which allows you to send data at the same time. Whereas before switches came along, there was normally devices a bit like this, pretty much look the same, but they was called hubs, and they were basically dumb switches. They didn't have a router board, and all they knew what to do was to send one packet. So this is, say you send a request out to Google to go on www.google.com. You would send a packet of data to the Google server to pull, the web page down. So with a hub, what you used to do is you used to send the web page out that you wanted to get the web page from. It would send it out, and it would go off to the Google server. That's fine. But when you have multiple computers or multiple devices trying to use the hub at the same time, you have what's called a crash, where if computers try and send more than one data at a time, they're all trying to do it simultaneously at once, they can't do it. So the packet ends up going back, and then the computers have to calculate when they can resend the packet without causing the crash again. Now this was a real limit on bandwidth and speed that you could have on your network, whereas now with these little devices here, you can send data at once. It will all go through at once. There's no issue there. Tip top, happy enough. This device is a Netgear, can't remember what they call this. Is the FS308. It's an 8-port switch, and I believe it's a 10 to 100. The switches that I'm using at the moment, they're a bit better. This was my first switch I used on my network when it was relatively small. I can't really show you the switch I'm using at the moment. It's on my other videos. It's a HP ProCurve 2524, I think, and that's a 10-100-1000 switch. It's a gigabit switch. It's 24 ports as well, so that's pretty helpful. So it's a lot more expanded. I'm not using all the ports just yet, but it's more expandable, and it allows a faster speed than this. But we'll get on to speed and boosting performance in a tiny bit. I'm going to talk now, because it's very well you're having all these routers, switches, but you're not going to get nowhere without using one of these little fellas. This is an Ethernet wire. Okay, so this is the thing that you'll plug into your router. You go to your computer or your device or whatever you're trying to plug in. It goes in the switch as well, router to switch. And this is the little cable that you use to transfer data from your computer to the router that goes to the internet. You use it to transfer data across your network. So these are very important in the fact there's, you know, without this you won't be able to do anything on your network unless you're using wireless, but still you will need an Ethernet wire at some point on your network. They come in different categories. I believe you can, I'm not too sure if Cat4 is still available, but the standard at the moment is Cat5 or Cat5e, and you know, basically in the categories, the higher the category, so there's Cat6 now, it allows a bigger bandwidth and allows you to send more megabytes of data across the network at any second. This cable here is a Cat5e, so it's a pretty standard cable. Yeah, it's a patch, UTP patch, FTP patch. So yeah, fairly basic. We're going to go a tiny bit advanced now. It's something that probably wouldn't be used on your average home network, but if you're a bit of a security person, you want to know that your network's secure, etc., you might choose to induce one of these. Now this is a firewall. It's a physical firewall, not like one you see on your computer. You just go on Windows and you find the settings in Control Panel. This is a physical network firewall. So this is the little device. This will sit between the connection that comes in through the phone line, so your internet connection, and it'll sit between your internet connection and your router. Basically, this allows you to filter and monitor what's coming in and out of the network. It allows a bit more of a control over what's coming in the network. Average routers these days, they tend to come with a firewall built in, but they're not as manageable as these here. So, you know, it's not necessary, but if you want, you can purchase one of these. They're fairly inexpensive. I think I got this on eBay for 30 quid. I don't use it anymore because I turned an actual server into a firewall using I've got PBX software running on one of the servers to do that. But you've got on here, you've got your WAN ports at this side, so you can have 2 internet connections coming in, and then you've got your other Ethernet outputs. These will go to your routers or other devices, proxy or proxy server as well. If you have one of those running on your network, they would go to that. And also, this little fella, this is a serial RS232 console connection. Basically, that allows you to plug this in to a port on the back of your computer, desktop, or something. Not obviously an RS232 port, using a special console wire, and this allows you to manage this device on your network. So it's not like any normal device. This one doesn't have like your router, an online little forum thing that you can use. Instead, you have to use the console cable. You open up its console, you can change its settings, etc. So that's pretty cool. Mom's has gone off over there. So, performance-wise, you've got a nice little network running. It's about 150 megabits per second, so it's fairly old now. It's a couple of years old. You want to provide a better signal to your network, so wireless. You might want a better wireless signal with a faster bandwidth. You might just want to upgrade your router to be able to support a faster bandwidth. It's fairly easy. Routers are fairly inexpensive. You can pick them up between £50 and £60 today. You know, for a pretty good router. When you're going out there to buy a router, though, especially if it's a wireless router, you want to be very careful what you're looking at doing. You see them out there at the moment. It's like, oh, this is a 600 megabits N router, or this is a 1 gigabit N AC router. That may be brilliant. Yeah, look, oh, whoa, look at that massive bandwidth. Look what I can do. Not precisely. It doesn't work quite like that, 'cause you're still going to have your own devices running on your network. So you might have your desktop computer running. It might have a wireless network card in, but it might be a G network card that only supports 50 megabits a second, or it might be an N that only supports 150 megabytes per second or 300 megabytes per second. So you're not going to get the full potential out of your devices and your router unless you have the most up-to-date or relevant NIC put in the system. So you can go out there now, you can buy laptops with N Wi-Fi cards in them. They run around 600 megabits per second theoretical bandwidth. So then you think, right, brilliant. That laptop could do 600 megabits theoretical bandwidth. So let's go out and buy a router that can also support that. So there you're getting the most out of your router. Even if your other devices can't do 600 megabits per second, you've got that leniency to allow the devices, you know, more bandwidth than what you previously would have had. Ethernet-wise, Ethernet these days, they work on a 10-100 to 1000 basis. So that's what that means, is that's how many megabits per second it can transfer to other devices on the network. So 10, that's fairly relevant. It's they're not even used really. They're around. I've seen them around, but I can't really imagine why a house would have a 10 megabits per second Ethernet connection. But 100 definitely. That allows a transfer speed of 100 megabits per second. So it's fairly standard. Most NICs on a computer, certainly modern day computers, and computers maybe from 1995, I think. No, I'm not sure. It might be 1995 onwards. They tend to support around 100 megabits per second. But you know, that's fairly the transition period from 1995. You can transform from the 10 megabits per second technology to the 100 megabits per second technology. But if you're looking for some uber performance, something brilliant, 1000 megabits per second Ethernet is a very, very good idea. That's essentially a gigabit, so 1 gigabyte per second theoretical bandwidth, which is massive, I must say. It's not particularly supported in older computers, but certainly computers released around 2012 onwards, I would say, they generally have a gigabit NIC in them. But it's really easy. If you want to upgrade your network card in a computer, you can just go out to eBay or eBuyo even. You just find the NIC you want. I think you find them around £20 for a gigabit Ethernet card, and stick that in there, make sure the driver is installed, and then you can play on with that. That's pretty cool. But again, that may be all well and good, you may have a gigabit NIC in your device, but do you have network devices, so your actual switches or routers, that can support gigabit Ethernet connections? Like, going back to this little thing, this is a 10 to 100 connection, so it can switch between 10 10 megabytes per second. I think 10 gigabits per second. That's a well off the mark. So this can go 10 megabytes per second, 100 megabytes per second. I don't know why I want to keep saying gigabytes. That's just skipping forward a couple of years, I think. But yeah, 10 or 100 megabytes per second. This is all this device can do. So it's fairly standard, bog standard stuff. Whereas you want devices now, if you go out to the internet and you find a website like eBuyer, you can find a newer version of this switch. I think it's about £35, and on it will say 10, 100, 1000. So if you're going to go out there and buy a switch because you have more devices on your network than your router can handle Ethernet wise, you're going to have to go on the internet. You're going to have to find the switch you like the look of, or whatever. If you want a certain brand, Netgear's quite a good selection for home networking, I'd say. You want to look for a switch with a 10, 100, 1000 Ethernet connection, which is pretty cool. Most as I was saying a tiny bit earlier, most routers these days, they tend to have a gigabit Ethernet connection going in, so you're pretty covered with most modern day routers. So I was going to show you the current switch I'm running. It's not on at the moment because we're doing updates, but I suppose we can try and turn the webcam around to face the switch. So let's have a look. Oh god, this is when you should really have your webcam running. So, not sure how much you can see because this webcam is crap, but down here, this is my HP ProCurve 2425 10, 100, 1000 switch. So this is a main switch for my house. It is managing all of the Ethernet connections to all the devices, and then going to the router. As I said, this is off because I'm doing updates with these wires. I want to change the patch cords over for shorter ones, and especially over here because these patch cables are a tiny bit too long, so they need to be updated really. But yeah, so that's my current switch in there. One thing you can see below, this is completely irrelevant to home network. Nothing's plugged into it yet, apart from it's got its lead going off to the router. But that's going to handle all the voice over IP phones for this house once we start connecting them together. Let's pop him back up there and close that door because that's going to let some draft run around. So overall, home networking, fairly simple, fairly easy to set up, especially if you've got a small number of devices that you just want to collectively put onto a small home, small office, small home network. So you just get your standard Ethernet connection with your standard little router. Normally you want to aim around an N300 for that kind of, you've got about 3-4 devices running on your network. You want to about an N300. You can push it up to a 600 if you feel like it. Just connect them up. If there's wireless, allow the wireless to give out signal, so you can connect your mobile or your tablet or your laptop, etc. to that device. You've got a pretty tidy home network. You're going to chug along for a while. Then as you add more, you might wish to add a switch, or you might want to repeat the wireless if you've got a larger household. But yeah, overall, home networking, not too difficult. Again, I am Kurt Com. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like if you haven't already done so. It helps. I will be releasing more videos in the next week. We try and release an episode each week. I'm not sure what I'm going to cover next week just yet because I'm quite busy at the moment. But we'll see when it comes to it. We might do some kind of wiring tutorial or something fun, I think, especially if I'm replacing wires in that closet. You might as well film it and show you how to do some wiring. So, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. As I said, videos released every week.